Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're just going to wait about 30 more seconds for some more people to join today's presentation.
And thank you again, Brian and Joe.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us for today's webcast, Create More Revenue Generating Hours for Your Customer Service Team. I am Elizabeth Galantine, Editor-in-Chief of MDM, and I'm your moderator for today's 60-minute program, sponsored by Connexium. Joining us momentarily, we will have Ray Grady, CEO and President of Connexium, along with distributors Brian Webb and Joe Laux. Before we get to that conversation, I have a couple of housekeeping notes. First, we are recording this webcast, so you will be receiving a link to the recording later this afternoon. Feel free to watch it again or share it with anyone else. Also, we will have a Q&A session of the presentation coming up in a little bit, so at any time during the presentation, feel free to submit a question using that chat panel. Go ahead and type it, and we will get to as many as we can when we reach the Q&A. With that, again, I am Elizabeth Galantine, Editor-in-Chief of MDM, and I'm going to start out today giving you all some data background on the topic of customer service. So we did a survey in January in conjunction with Connexium, where we had about 128 distributors respond on the topic of customer service. And what we wanted to find out was how important customer service is to your business, what the current state is of where you see your customer service team operating, some of the issues that you face with getting to them to where you want them to be, and then where is that place that you want them to be. So I'm going to share a little bit of the background data from that survey. And I like to start with this data point because I think it really sets the tone for where distributors are with customer service. As you can see, most distributors said that customer service has a significant impact on their revenue. Nearly 75% saying it has a significant impact. So clearly there are bottom line implications when it comes to customer service. Another way of looking at that in a little bit more detail to show the importance of customer service is we asked respondents to rank the most important factors that differentiate themselves from the competition. And as you can see, there were a range of choices here that they had to range from most important to least important. And once again, sales and customer service clearly coming out on top as the most important. And also anecdotally, I hear that all the time in my conversations with distributors. Then we got into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of customer service and what is actually happening in the businesses. So we asked respondents to rank the average ratio of proactive to reactive activities. And as you'll see, they reported about 39% of customer service teams' time being spent on proactive activities versus 61% spent on reactive activities. And as you'll see from the bar directly below that, it was pretty much the opposite of the ideal scenario of where they would like to be, actually a little bit more so. So they'd love to see them having about 71% of time spent on proactive activities versus 29% on reactive. And then a little bit more detail on the data on this. I don't have a slide for this, but I thought it was interesting. So we asked specifically how much of their time employees are spending on data entry, and that came in at about 48%. So nearly half of their time spent on data entry, which is clearly a reactive activity. So that's contributing to some of the gap there on where they're spending their time. And then also, so this is important to the owners and the leadership and distribution, but I thought another fact from the survey that we did that is important to point out is it's also important to the people who are performing the activities themselves, because when we asked respondents what metrics they use to measure their customer service team's performance, so how well they see them doing on their job, by far the #1 response was customer satisfaction. And that came in at 82%. And the next closest one was repeat purchases at 50%, just to give you an idea of the gap there. And so, distributors want their customer service team spending time on proactive activities, and the team themselves want to be spending time on the proactive activities that are going to lead to that high customer satisfaction score and show that they're performing well at their jobs. This last slide I'm going to share before we get into the presentation is some more detail on maybe why we're seeing that gap. So we've got the top 3 challenges here. This is what survey respondents reported. Number one, no surprise, with COVID-19, and I know we're all hitting that 1-year anniversary of, where were you a year ago today? Market forces and supply chain disruption have really impacted customer service performance as far as having to spend more time on those reactive activities versus proactive activities. Number 2, resistance to cultural change. Of course, we saw this before COVID. We're going to see it long after. This is kind of across all industries and sectors where, you've got that status quo, how to do a certain job, and you're reluctant to maybe spread your wings a bit and try some different things. You may not have time for training or skill building to get your team to that next place. And then last, or not last, but third, were staffing challenges, just feeling like you don't have enough people. The people who you do have are not able to deliver quite that level of best-in-class service that you would like to see, because they're pressed for time and they've got to get done the tasks that need to be done. So that's the high-level overview of the data from the survey that we did with Connexium. I should note you will also be getting much more on this data this afternoon. Everyone participating in this webcast will be getting an exclusive look at a larger infographic with more detail from the survey that will be coming to your email as well this afternoon. So be on the lookout for that. But I wanted to start out with this background information as I hand things off to Ray to begin the discussion with Brian and Joe, who can talk about some firsthand experiences with some of these issues.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for joining today. I'm Ray Grady. I'm the CEO of Connexium, and I'm really glad to have Brian Webb and Joe Lokes here with me today. Brian is the Director of Sales and Operations at D&H Distribution, and Joe is the Global Director of Sales and Ops at ADI Global. So gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us.
I think one of the things that I'm always interested when I talk to customers, and I'll maybe, Brian and Joe, I'll ask you individually, just overall, how was business? How was it last year? What surprised you? Because when you came into the 2020 planning cycle, you thought the world was going to look one way, and when you exited, it looked entirely different. So I guess, how was 2020? What surprised you? And then how do you feel about 2021? Maybe Brian, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think you hit on it right there, Ray, with the planning cycle. How do you plan for something like this? And what is it going to look like? How do you get by the next month, let alone the next 6 months, 12 months? So that was definitely a challenge for our teams, and working through what supply chain looks like. Being a leading technology distributor, our supply chain has its roots starting in China and coming into the US and into Canada. So we really had to scramble to understand what that impact meant for us as a business, and then planning for that. So one of the things that we learned was that getting creative and using different types of logistics, budgeting appropriately for shipping and container costs. We didn't see too much of a backlog, and D&H is a leader in supplying technology to schools, to the medical industry, to all kinds of frontline areas that need this technology. Software solutions to Chromebooks. Imagine the school districts and the Chromebooks, and planning for that. So, we definitely were able to keep up with it. The demand was far greater than anticipated and far greater than normal, as we are assisting school districts, government, and private enterprises to transitioning to work at home. Everything from headsets to computers to cloud solutions is exactly what D&H delivers. And we had to really adapt at our customer service skills to keep up with what their needs were, which changed overnight.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. And, when you understand your business, I'm glad that things went well, but you're not surprised to hear that things went well. And I want to go back to your demand was unforeseen statement, because there's businesses that could probably, outside of the supply chain ramifications, just the ability to run a business with unforeseen demand. I'm just curious. We'll go back to that in a moment. But Joe, maybe your thoughts on 20 and how you think 2021 is going to look.
Yeah, so I would say we have a lot of the same challenges that that Brian spoke about. Supply chain, certainly. For us, with we have a wide network of distribution centers and branch locations that are very much like a retail store. So having to deal with shifting regulations in terms of what could be open and what couldn't. We were very fortunate to be identified as an essential business in pretty much all of our markets. So we were able to open, but kind of keeping track of modified operations and social distancing and what was required and what wasn't required. That was certainly a challenge. And I would also say that for us, to just sort of tie it back to the theme of this, it definitely accelerated some of our digital transformation initiatives. We were lucky enough to have started a lot of those. So things like order automation really helped us. So if we were, for example, forced to close a location in a particular city, if we had set up everything in the right way, all of those orders would flow and would get processed, even if we didn't have someone there at the computer to be able to see that email, for example. In terms of how we performed, and that was probably one of the most surprising things for me. Obviously Q2 was very challenging, but we recovered very quickly, and I think a lot of that was our ability to do a lot of the same things that Brian talked about, which is respond to certain to the changing market conditions. For us, it was a bit different. It was things like thermal cameras, right, and thermal imaging, as people were looking to set those up, especially in things like mobile test sites or mobile treatment facilities and things like that, or things that had to spring up very quickly and needing things like video surveillance or access control or thermal imaging. So I was very surprised at how quickly we responded, and our business recovered.
That's great. No, that's great. And I think if you look at the kind of the topic, create more revenue generating hours for your customer service team, I think this concept of unforeseen demand or unforeseen changes and businesses needing to react, and whatever the spectrum might be, it's just interesting that I think it sounds like you kind of had to free up time, for folks. So what, as we continue into the conversation here, it'll be good to just kind of continue to poke at that. Now, I think we were going to maybe do a poll for the audience. Elizabeth, are we going to do that at this point? Okay. All right. So the question here is: do you believe customer service gives your company a competitive advantage? So I cannot vote, so I'm not going to vote, but we'll do that.
I tried to vote. I tried to vote too.
What the crowd has to say. So as the crowd is doing that, Brian, how would you, oh, here we go. Yeah, 92% yes, 3% no, 5% unsure. Okay, that's interesting. And that doesn't surprise me, right? I think in a world where customer experience wins, and I think we all would admit that that's kind of the world we live in now. Maybe Joe, I'll start with you. How do you feel about that? Do you feel as though how you service your customers and engage with customers is a competitive advantage to the folks you compete with?
Oh, absolutely. Our statement of purpose is sort of built on that. We definitely see ourselves as a customer service organization. Our statement of purpose is that we create indispensable partnerships by ensuring the success of our customers, team members, and supplier partners. So everything is built on that. We definitely want to differentiate ourselves through customer service and the service that we provide.
Okay. And Brian, how do you view that? Like, what I'm assuming you agree. I know you agree because we've talked about this. But how do you deliver that in practice to your team and then ultimately to your customers?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we really pride ourselves on being that nimble. We're large, but we can turn that ship pretty quickly for our customer needs. And nothing put us through the test like this COVID pandemic, to how nimble and how flexible we could be. And I really think that the customer service aspect, where we win is our people. As a distributor, we're in the same position as everybody else in terms of logistics, our warehouses, distribution centers, dealing with our vendors, and even the customers we share with our competition. So I think for sure it's how quickly we can respond to those customers' needs. How quickly do they view us as the go-to company for their solutions? And they are looking to us during something such as the pandemic to guide them. What's the best way for them to ship or order or place something and keep their business moving.
Interesting.
So
So
yeah, us
delivering
being
consultative, being insightful, saying, hey, we think this is based on our data, we think this is the solution for you.
That's exactly right. So what that did for us is it took more time to develop within our customer service reps and our sales associates. We went from being very transactional and what is the part number and what is the price and how quick can we get that, to having to take those phone calls from 3 and 4 minutes to now 20 and 30 minutes. As you go deeper into building the bill of materials, learning more about what their unique struggles are because of the pandemic, our average phone call rate, went up. Well, as we've seen, our resources are finite. I don't have more customer service reps. So when the average phone call goes from 4 minutes to 20,
Yeah.
directly related to the pandemic, you have to scramble and account for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And as Elizabeth teed up the conversation, right? 50% of their time is dealt with manual tasks. It's going to be hard for them to be a solution provider to the customer, right? So if you can find ways in which to free that up, maybe Joe, what are any examples that you have, whether it's a loyalty program or something you've done differently now with whether based on technology or business process change that's allowed you to do something different to delight and excite your customers?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think I was thinking about this, and one of the things that that stands out, because again, we're sort of at that anniversary where things started to drastically change. We realized at that time that a lot of our customers were going to have extra time on their hand, or their techs are going to have times on their hands where they can't visit the job site and they're going to be sitting there with nothing to do. So we started offering online training for their techs and taking a lot of the training content that we had and making it available to our customers so that they could at least use that time productively and have a benefit to our customers. I think the other thing too is like Brian said, it's even as we talk about order automation, which I know is the theme of this, I see it's not just about reducing data entry, but it's allowing the sales rep, the customer rep, to spend more time, especially on those complex orders, so that they can make sure that they're correct and everything is in order, and allow the more routine orders to flow through the system, because you don't need that hand holding.
We have seen that too. I mean, it's interesting. We're the business we're in, that these are the conversations we have every day. And I kind of would have thought coming into 2020, as we got into the second quarter, that a lot of our customers and prospective customers would have been about taking cost out of the business. Now we have some that was the reality, but the vast majority have been the business cases were around delighting the customer, reallocating labor to spend more time with the customer, and doing something that eliminates errors, that gets a product to a customer faster in a more efficient, with less errors, right?
Yeah,
so it's interesting to hear that's it's been a good good sign for us and good sign for our customers, is that these people can now do more value-added tasks, which ultimately, I mean, we talked about customers who saw their customer success, their NPS score go up 10% and getting products to customers faster. So it's been interesting to see what you thought would happen in our first pandemic, as kind of the results have been a little bit different, which has been interesting in our industry. So I think we have another poll here. So the question to the team will be: are you prioritizing digital transformations, business process automation in 2021? So let's see what the crowd comes back with here. And maybe as the crowd is, as we're building to the crescendo here, let's see what they're going to say. I think one of the things that I'm always interested, obviously, digital transformation. Oh, that's a yes. Okay, 86% of the folks are looking at digital transformation and business process automation in 2021. 9% no, and then 5% are not sure yet. That's an interesting stat. And one of the things that we talk about internally here is, this may sound like a silly question, what do we like? What category are we? Are we in customer experience? Are we in automation? Are we in digital transformation? How do we think about ourselves? And so I guess my question to you, Brian, would be, how was our project born? Was it born under a customer experience initiative? Was it born under a customer success initiative? Just maybe it'd be interested to learn. And Joe, I'm going to ask you the same question. So think about your answer too. But, Brian, just kind of curious, how did we come about and how did this project come about?
Yeah, so when we look at our 1 and 3 year plans, we always have to talk about scale. And as technology world evolves, so does D&H. And this was really born out of, we've talked about it already a lot this afternoon, freeing up our resources, freeing up our people. And one thing that we know that we always have an opportunity to continuously improve upon is that meshing of automation and people, and how do we get the most out of our people. So really it was born out of reducing stress and anxiety to our co-owners. We're an ESOP company, so it means we share in the profits, and we score very highly and value very highly when an individual co-owner, let alone a team, is showing signs of stress or anxiety in taking care of our customers. So it came about of lowering anxiety and stress, reducing errors, while at the same time, we have to be able to scale. Our customers are moving up that technology stack. We're moving up that stack for them on their behalf. And so we needed touchless order entry. And we just started to look at who are the leaders in that space. And the other thing for D&H is it's really important to us, the fit and profile. Being that we have to service our co-owners, and every one of our co-owners has a stake in an investment such as a Connexium, we've got to be honest and true to that. And we have a lot of input from a lot of different people, and this came out the clear winner. Also, I think because Connexium looks, feels, and acts a lot like D&H. So that was just as important to us to what you delivered. And the solution has been great. And we immediately saw a reduction in everything we talked about, with the stress, the anxiety, giving a deeper, more meaningful relationship experience over the phone with our customers, and turning our SLAs, just turning the dial up on what we can do for them.
Okay, no, that's good. And I agree on the cultural front. That's always important. And it's always nice when you're on the phone with the customer and say, okay, these are the type of people I want. It's a two-way street, right? Like, are we gonna be able to work well together? And I feel like we've got a great partnership. Joe, how do you think about that? Where was our initiative born? And if you're someone in the crowd who's trying to figure out like what category and how do I bring this to my boss to get it, to get their mind share, how did you position it? And where did it come from?
Yeah, so we had been, investing in trying to work through, EDI, web orders, and ways to try and respond to customers through a digital means, right? But I would say that it was born from two fronts. One was a sales transformation front of saying, okay, we've got a lot of order takers and people who are doing data entry, like was referenced in the statistics before, and we want to transform them, make sure that they are spending their time being salespeople and growing sales, cross-selling, upselling, and so when we looked at our order base and our order methods, we realized we have a very large percentage of our orders that are placed through email with using an attachment. And so we said, okay, well, there was a solution out there in Connexium that could help us process those orders. One of the things that was very attractive to us was that it's something that didn't require a change in the customer behavior. So if you think about EDI or web or a lot of these others, the customer has to change the way that they do business with you to be able to process the orders. With Connexium, it should and is seamless, right? They send in their email and then it gets processed by Connexium. The customer doesn't have to change anything or do anything different. We also knew, and this is the second front, that if we did this, it would be a customer service benefit. There's the time aspect, which I alluded to earlier, that and Brian's alluded to, that you have now more time, more bandwidth to look at those complex orders, to interact with the customer at a different level other than just as a data entry level. But there's also the quality aspect as well, right? I mean, no one can be 100% accurate all the time, right? So it reduces data entry errors, which is better customer experience at the end of the day.
I think you said something there. There's a lot of interesting things there, but the changing of the customer behavior, that is one that I found very interesting and continue to find very interesting because, I had spent some time in the e-commerce world and some of the time was in the B2B e-commerce world. And whereas it makes sense at a certain level that, hey, we're going to let this customer go self-serve and they can do it on their time and they can upsell and cross-sell. But ultimately the burden of pain on the transaction on the B2B side is on you guys, not on your customer. Right. So you can either try and force them to do something that maybe they don't want to do, or you can automate something and which will give you time to then go around and delight them. So I found that to be a really interesting point on the change of customer behavior. It's a less risky way to get return because you actually own your own destiny, right? You're not dependent upon a third party to change behavior, which is, as we all know, is challenging.
Yeah, and Ray, I may insert a point there too. It's on us and not our customer, as you pointed out. What we wanted was that next pass-through element. How do we get it off of us? And that's where Connexium picked up the slack. One thing that I didn't know going into the project, but we were all sensitive to, was how do we not make this a large burden on our own in-house IT department to automate this. And when Connexium showed us the solution, which is we've got 95% of this, and it's been a very low touch, low impact to our own in-house IT, we were off to the races. We just knew that was the best solution.
That's great. And I love my SI partners, but to not have to be dependent upon a 6 to 9 to 12 months project here it's a great thing. Because again, in the e-commerce world, I did not have that. Right. Did not have that luxury.
Maybe, and I was just going to add that it also makes it very easy to pilot, because that was a big thing too. When we weren't sure, like, okay, is this going to work or is it going to work the way we think it's going to work? Well, you can implement it on a small scale without, again, changing customer behavior. So you don't have to worry about them doing anything and just see, okay, is this going to work the way we think it's going to work? So it makes it very low risk as as an entry point.
So it feels like a lot like this wasn't digital transformation. It was more optimization, automation. That was kind of the driver for you guys. So maybe Joe, I'll start with you. Like, what was the process before Connexium showed up, and now what is it now?
Yeah, so before Connexium showed up, we were looking at, so we would do EDI with our large customers who partnered with us on that, and then we were obviously investing in building our web capabilities and looking to respond to that, because that's, customers are asking for that, so we wanted to make sure we provided them that ability. And then it was a lot of what was talked about in the stats, a lot of our salespeople spending a lot of time doing data entry, around emails and attachments. So it also too, another thing I want to add, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, but very difficult to respond if there's changes. So for example, if I have a sales rep that calls in sick one day and the customer's emailing directly to them, and now no one else can see that email, and those POs get missed, right? So pre-Connexium, it was hard for us to respond to things like if we had to, close a branch and send everybody home, either because there's a hurricane coming or whatever. Suddenly it's very difficult, for us to capture those orders. We had a mechanism to shift phone calls, but to get a hold of those emails and the attached POs, we didn't really have a mechanism for that. So that was a big piece of what it was like before.
Great, good, interesting. Yeah, interesting. Brian, what was your kind of before state?
Very, very similar to Joe's, with web, XML, EDI offerings, but mostly it was just that very manual pull. So we're going through an evolution at D&H, being again over a 100-year-old company. You can imagine it was born out of a sales rep does all things. Our sales reps are the credit rep, and they're helping with the logistics. I mean, just ETAs, the whole thing. So what we've really done is defined what customer service is as post sales, and that's what my team is taking on, is that post sales support. And so we started with throwing bodies at it. So with over 300 sales reps across the company, and wanting to get them out of the loop of manually touching orders, we stood up a team of about 8, order entry people. So in raw numbers, I thought that was interesting to get them to take 30% of our manual orders off the plate, and that was the numbers. So then the next evolution is you step back and you say, well, this is never going to scale, especially when we're experiencing growth rates of double digits percentage every year. So we needed to get to something that was going to scale and would supplement and augment those 8 individuals. And then one of the KPIs, which I think we're going to talk about later, but how impactful is our customer service team being? How do we take them from handling 30% to 100% of all manual touch orders and take that off of a sales rep's plate, get our sales reps much more defined into that pre-sales role? So that was all at play in our evolution. And again, Connexium was, in my mind, the only solution that was going to get us to scale and to get us to hit our KPIs.
Yeah, so I'm going to hold on the KPIs, but there's one question I asked, maybe the business case. How did you, in a world where we're going to reallocate labor, in a world where we're going to sell more with the same people, how did you quantify and how did you justify this type of an investment?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with that one. So for us, we looked at the business case through productivity, knowing these other gains would come with it, right? So we said, look, here's the amount of time it takes for an average order, right? Manual order entry. Here's what percentage we think we can automate. This is how much time we would save, and then be able to reallocate that to be able to allocate those into proactive selling efforts that would then grow revenue. So it was just a very basic straight line business case along those lines.
Yeah.
Ours is fairly basic.
Sorry, Brian, actually go ahead, Brian, and then I'll ask you both the same question, because I think the group might be curious on this part too.
Well, it was very similar. It was pretty simple. Percent of accounts that were manual, which was a very high percentage for us. We then spent 1 year internally doing what we could do to automate those accounts on our own, and we tracked the results. And we were able to, on our own, turn 3 accounts, by the way. So it was a very easy business case to say, we need a solution that's going to provide this. And we also looked at our SLAs, and Joe kind of pointed this out too. Another data point would be that at any given point before Connexium, we didn't know how many orders had come in today, how many were sitting in the queue, and how many got held over for various reasons, because we were at the mercy of our sales reps and our order entry folks just getting into their own inboxes. Even with a team inbox, it's a more manual pull to get that data and get that information. With Connexium on board now, we know exactly how many orders come in, how many we've able to get back out, and we can keep looking at it that way.
Yeah, that's interesting, Brian. I've heard that from a couple customers, to where the value proposition that we think about our product, right? But then there's also this dynamic that says, well, from what I've heard from a few, like, you can be the hub of my customer business logic, right? Because now what was in the heads of other people can be in one central system, which I never really had thought about it that way, but that's pretty compelling. That could be a pretty compelling value prop to someone, right? To have one place where all that customer specific business logic lives, right? Because it's not in your ERP necessarily. It may not be in your CRM necessarily. I found that to be interesting. Okay, one last question on this one, then we'll move to the next poll. So we talked about the business case. We talked about how it got justified. Just curiously, who had to approve it? Was it just a sales approval? Was it a finance approval? Was it a supply chain approval? Like who had to approve a project like this? Brian, I'll start with you. It's a little bit. Brian's answer will be interesting based on the ownership model of D&H. But go ahead and
the short answer is yes. All it was.
Okay.
We have a anytime we're going to do an investment, we have a approval process. We put the business case together, we get it in front of stakeholders, they sign off on it. And again, a big part of the initial approval was, is the customer going to have to change anything? So let's, we don't want to do anything that's going to disrupt, our flow of orders and the way our customers are used to doing business with us. But the short answer is yes, it had to get approved by all of those stakeholders.
Got it. Okay. What about you, Brian? Probably a little bit different in your environment.
Yeah. So we're empowered. We're empowered very laterally at D&H, being that we all have equal shares and we all are employee co-owners of the company. We all get a vote. Everybody gets a say. And so our culture is very unique that, if one person thinks that this is a great idea and they can get the consensus going and everyone thinks it's a great idea, then you're free to launch that. We do it in a responsible way, but it means buy-in from all the different departments. And it's also coming up with the value proposition for each department. So typically you might not think about touchless order automation or customer support having to go and do a presentation to the advertising wing or trade management or the team that loads rebates every day or the rest of the finance team. You wouldn't think about that. How about facilities maintenance folks? But that's what we did. We put a road show together. We had to go from department to department, and we had to show why we wanted to do this and what the return on investment was going to be, and win support that way.
That's great. That's good. And I want to get back to the call center, the sales department, because we're going to talk about change management here in a minute. So let's go to our last poll. So we'll ask the crew, what would you do with an extra 1,000 hours available for your inside sales, or account management team? Be interested to see if something else comes in at. We'll see. Okay, here we go. Interesting. Okay. New customer acquisition, sell more to existing customers, check in on existing customers. That's kind of what you guys are saying, right? It's almost 80+% of the folks just doing a better job with existing customers. So that's interesting. I want to get back to the change management, right? Because I think whereas I don't think people wake up in the morning and say, I want to handle manual documents, I can't wait to print and rekey things into a system. There still may have been some fear, uncertainty, and doubt as to what was going to happen. Did you? We can sit here all day as the SaaS provider and say it is about labor reallocation. We're going to free you up to do more value-added things. How did you have to deal with some of that, some of those issues, Brian? So maybe let's start with change management and what you did, and/or maybe even more importantly, what you didn't do and wish you did, because maybe some of these folks here can learn from what you didn't do.
Great question. We definitely experienced all three: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Going in, we planned for the fact that change management would be the number one thing to plan for and to train and to communicate. So to that point, we over communicated what our plan was prior to launch Connexium, and of course post-launch Connexium. I think that is so important, especially when you have an order entry team and you have sales reps who have done this for so long, and now you're going to implement automation. We all know where that's going to go within ourselves individually. So as a business, it was an opportunity to work with our teams to really show them what this meant. That we still need you, we value you. This is to reduce your stress and anxiety and allow you to keep doing your job in a much more creative, fulfilling, and healthy manner. And so we weren't looking to replace any humans at all with this. It was really all about that customer experience. One thing that I've learned that we would definitely do better is to understand customers that already have an EDI relationship. Connexium is so good that you could you could overlay Connexium into that EDI relationship, or you could treat them as standalone. And myself and my team really didn't understand that little nuance going into it. So it's probably working in the beginning part of the launch to understand where you want to place Connexium. Do you want to do it in conjunction with EDI customers to maximize that EDI data exchange, or do you want to just aim it exclusively at non-EDI customers, or do some sort of blend? So that's been something that we've been learning. And just back to the change management, you just cannot over communicate enough. So if you're giving the team and the company a monthly update or a weekly update, and you miss one of those updates, boy, you really hear about it, because you've got them into that cycle now, and they wonder if something's wrong when it's so new and fragile. No, nothing's wrong. The person who puts the updates out was just on PTO that day.
Got it. Yeah, good. Okay, that's good stuff. And that's good insight on the EDI front too. I think we do see some customers leveraging us in that way. Joe, what about your end? Did you have change management issues that you had to address?
Yeah, no, of course, and a lot of similarities. So from the fear perspective, I think there's anytime you're automating something, there's fear that, okay, you're automating my job away, right? So we had to definitely over communicate and break through that of like, look, we're not looking to do this to reduce headcount. We're looking to do this to give you more time with the customer. Like I said, more time to spend on those more complicated orders, or more time to spend selling and developing those relationships with your customers. So definitely breaking through the fear, and communication was a big piece of that. I would say control is another big part of it, right? So salespeople want to have control and visibility over everything that's going on with that account. Brian talked about how, they're everything to that account: the credit rep, the customer service rep, the sales rep. And so they feel like they're losing control because they're losing visibility, right? So they were the ones entering the order. They were making decisions at the time of order entry. Sometimes bad decisions, right, at the time of order entry, and they saw themselves losing that control and visibility, and so we had to build in some things of alerts and ways for them to still see what was happening on the account, so that they didn't lose that. And I think part of that control too is, if I could give advice and lessons learned, when we rolled it out, because we were not wanting to do anything too risky, not wanting to change customer behavior, we rolled it out in a way where we said, look, you decide what goes to Connexium, and you determine it. You forward the email. So you get a chance to look at the order and see if this is a good fit for Connexium or not, based off of, we have things like project pricing and some complexities that we had to eventually work through our deployment. So we gave that decision to the sales rep, and then we then had to fight that later to say, okay, well, now relinquish that control. We've solved these things. You should let these things go. We've got rules-based order processing, which will automatically allow these orders to be entered into the system, and then you could just review them. We had to fight through that. So I would definitely not do that again. I would roll it out with rules-based order processing to begin with, where the emails flow through and then they have a chance to review them. And then the final piece, and this was the biggest one, we severely underestimated how we were measuring our salespeople and what impact that had on the change management. So we had started to change how we measured them. We moved away from measuring them based off of transactions and moving toward account performance. So maybe about 6 months to a year prior, we had started that process of saying, look, it doesn't matter how many orders you enter into the system or who enters the order in the system. It's, you have a book of accounts, and how do those accounts perform, and moving into that direction. But psychologically, those sales reps, that's still how they saw themselves, was my value is dependent on the orders that I enter. Right. And so when you start saying, okay, well, let this go through, let something else process this order for you, they're saying, well, wait a minute, that's what makes me special. That's what makes me a great sales rep, is that I enter all of these orders. Now that's no longer going to be the case. So again, if I had to give advice and go back and do it over, I would have done a lot more to just change that before launching, to then say, okay, look, it's more about account management, less about transactions.
That's interesting. And I was we've got about 15 minutes left, and I was thinking, do I want to ask the KPI question, or do I want to go to some of the, I think we're going to maybe we'll move to Q&A now. And as we're moving to that officially, so if you all can just kind of type in your questions. Joe, you probably haven't had a chance to look at the Q&A, but I think you may have answered one of them. So one of the folks asked the question, are your sales teams worried about losing visibility into what their customers are ordering if the order goes to a customer service team? Was there any concern about commission impact? Now, I don't know if you 100% addressed that, but maybe I'll ask both of you, to just respond to that.
Yeah, I'll just sort of tie into so yes, obviously the visibility, big piece. How we had to make sure every dashboard, every little contest, everything that we rolled out was not based off of an order that you entered, but it was based off of other criteria. It didn't affect commissions at all. That we've never paid commissions based off of that aspect. So commissions weren't a concern, which is one of the things why we underestimated. We said, okay, well, it's not going to affect your paycheck and it doesn't affect your ultimate metrics. But if a local branch manager is measuring their team based off of the orders they entered yesterday and said, well, hey, you didn't enter as many orders. And it's like, well, that's because Connexium entered it for me. Then suddenly we had to just change all of that behavior downstream.
Okay, that's a good one. Thank you. That's interesting that you kind of answered that one proactively. Let's see. I'll kick this one. The questions are starting to come in here. Let's see. Let's start with, have you quantified reduction in per order line cost in entry orders? So basically ROI, right? I think that's kind of the question.
Yeah, I can answer that. We definitely broke down as making our business case to the rest of the business. And even just from my own knowledge, we did break down what it costs currently in-house for a sales rep and an order entry team to just enter an order into the system. What is that costing on our full-time headcount? And then what is that cost with Connexium? And that is actually a great question to ask. It's one of our KPIs, is when did we cross that threshold? When would we cross that threshold of Connexium returning the investment faster than our full-time headcount? And it happened much faster than I thought. It actually happened in our first 45 days of going live with Connexium, and with only our first 20 accounts.
That's great.
So you really, when you start to measure it and look at it per transaction, per line, you really get a good look at what these things cost.
So I'll ask this one now. We may have different. So this one's an interesting question. Does your company have a single point owner for Connexium strategy, since there are use cases across multiple departments? So again, and Brian, I know we're talking about other use cases, accounts payable. So now we're cross-functional. So how, it doesn't sound like there's a heavy lift on the IT side, but maybe do you have some person who owns it cross-functionally on the business?
You want to take that, Joe?
Yeah, we do. We have a process automation leader that owns automating processes. So whether that's sales order automation or, like you said, AP use cases, whether that's Connexium or RPA or whatever it is, right? EDI, they own that and they drive those cross-functionally. So,
okay. We did the same. We took someone who's on our business operations team and made them our Connexium guru. And we also took someone from our order entry team, our team lead, and really got them to be into the training and the trainer, and really working at that connection between Connexium and our IT department and our sales department. So that definitely is something you'd want to look at.
Okay. Interesting one here. Did you lose upsell opportunities, and did it affect did you lose upsell opportunities, and did it affect customer relationships with your sales team? So the fact that we're now streamlining these orders, did you leave money on the table because of it?
Yeah, I would say no. For us, no, because usually at that point in the sales cycle, they're emailing you a PO most every time they're entering the PO. And as long as you give some visibility where they can see the orders and see what's going on, they can then, if there's something missing on the order, circle back. And then in terms of the relationships, every time that comes up, I say I argue it enhances our relationships because you now have more time. You're not spending your time entering the data. You maybe are reviewing data, making suggestions, or talking to the customer about what their needs are and the needs of their business, where their business is going, and what products we have that match up to that. So I think it enhances both of those.
Okay, that's a good one. Brian, did you see any unintended consequences in this area post deployment?
No, it was the opposite. It was what Joe said. It was the opposite of what the question is. It was a great question. I had that too when we first went down this journey. But it allows us to free ourselves up from having those conversations. The customer assumes we're going to get the order right and we're going to get it entered correctly the first time, and we're able to give them the confidence that we're doing that. And I think the more that you can segment out your post-sales and pre-sales activities and defining those activities, the more successful that you're going to be, both in business, but also if you are looking at an automated tool such as Connexium. It'll help define the conversation, the workflow, the whole package, so you do have a more meaningful conversation with the customer.
Okay, let's see. Thank you. Joe, on the order entry process, were all your orders coming in through email in the same format?
Were they? Is that the question?
Yes. Were they? Yes, I think, yeah, it was basically.
Yeah, no, the answer is no, right? We have myriad of formats, and you can address those and that you can work through them. I would say the biggest challenge is when the customer changes their behavior, right? So we can handle things if the customer is consistent, right? Like, I'll give you an example of today, the customer puts the street address on the second line of their address in the PO, and then tomorrow, and a job number and a PO number, whatever that they want on the third line, and then tomorrow they flip flop it, and that's either because a new buyer has gone in and created that PO, or just because maybe they've made a change in the system. So keeping up with that in terms of mapping and things like that can be a challenge if the customer changes behavior on you. But firstly, if the customer is consistent, then Connexium can handle it, and order automation can handle it. It's when there's changes in that really kind of can create some challenges. Okay, and we have some we have customers that do have that variance, and I think with cross-reference tables and things, there are some things we can do to reduce that pain. Let's see. I'll go in order here. What metrics do you recommend for determining the right level of CS staffing? I'm not sure so there may need to be some more detail. So maybe I can just assume, is it orders per CSR? Is it so maybe just in as best as you can answer that one, guys, that'd be great. Brian, if you want to take the first stab, or I can.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, I think you definitely just want to measure, how many transactions are you doing a day, or how many transactions do you forecast you're going to be getting to a day? Figuring out how many people do you have aligned at those to understand how many can they facilitate and how many can they do, and then you'll be able to see the gap where you're going to fall short. You can do that a number of different ways, but then it is measuring how many accounts, stack ranking your accounts with a number of transactions broken down by month, per week, per year. You'll start to see your breadth accounts that are becoming active only quarterly or monthly. You'll start to see your daily transactional accounts, and then really just understanding what does it cost you to handle those lines of business per account by what you pay your people.
Okay, good. Let's see, we've got a couple more here, and then hopefully we'll be right on the hour. Be respectful of everybody's time. How do you address the question, customers want to talk to someone and we will lose our relationship with customers?
Yeah, so for us, that's fine. If a customer calls us and wants to place an order over the phone, they absolutely do that now, and we take those orders and place those orders, and that has no bearing on the order automation. In terms of Connexium and what we're doing in this case, it's just when a customer emails us a PO, right? And so again, if I think about like it's half an hour before our hub cutoff, shipping for the day, and I've got salespeople frantically trying to bang in orders at the end of the day, they're not talking to customers, they're frantically trying to get orders into the system. So again, to me, I see it as, okay, those data entry pieces and then the orders that are being emailed to us are just flowing into the system, and that gives the sales rep more time, that when the customer does want to talk to us, when they've reached out to either place an order by coming to our branch or by calling on the phone, I can spend more time talking to that customer, figuring out what their needs are, what's going on with their business, furthering that relationship rather than entering an order. So,
and I would add to get creative with whatever area you want to influence your business. So get creative with pricing, discounts, and incentives when it comes time to order. If you order even just through an email, or you order electronically in some way or form, you'll get a price break, or you'll get a break on shipping or handling charges, versus calling in to place that order and taking up my customer service reps valuable time at the time when it's ready to place an order. Of course, yes, we're calling in for pre-sale support, or you have questions about building that order. They're welcome to do that. Take all the time in the world, and maybe even place it on the phone at that point. That's no issue there.
Okay. And then one last question. What's the range of number of orders you process a day for a customer?
So for total ADI processes about 15,000 or so transactions a day in North America.
Got it. Okay. And Brian?
Yeah, we're pretty close to that. We're about 12,000 transactions per day for North America.
Okay. Great. And then for the team, if there's, we have customers that are doing less than that, and we have customers that are doing a lot more than that. So for the folks who asked the question, we could, if you're interested, you can reach out with us. And with that, Elizabeth, I think we're pretty much at the top of the hour. Joe and Brian, thanks for the rifle shot Q&A. Hopefully it was fun, and I learned some stuff. It was fun for me, and hopefully the crowd took something away from it. So Elizabeth, I'll hand it back off to you to wrap us up.
Yes, great. That was a wonderful conversation. Thanks so much, Joe and Brian, as Ray said, for being willing to be open about your experiences. And we appreciate everyone who asked the questions to participate. Just a reminder that you will be receiving a first look at that infographic of the survey we did with Connexium that'll be coming to your inboxes this afternoon. And then soon you will also be getting the link to this presentation. So again, please feel free to share. And I want to thank you all for participating. Thank you to Connexium. And it looks like we're getting a lot of comments. Everyone enjoyed the show. So we really appreciate it. And that is the end of our webcast today.
Again, thanks to the MDM team. And again, Brian and Joe, thanks a lot. I know nobody's, like I said yesterday, I know nobody's sitting around looking for things to do. So I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking us to join and allowing ADI to share its story on this. So appreciate it.
You guys are
It was
great.
a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yes,
right.
thank you.
We'll do it again. Thanks. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.